Welcome, everyone, to Watch Challenge. On each episode, we challenge ourselves to find and watch a film of a particular type and then report back the results to each other and you, fine listeners. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Mike Went. This episode's challenge is a fun one, in my opinion, needle drops.
Oh, are we ranking them now, Mike? Which ones are fun and which ones aren't fun? Or
No, I mean, obviously, I think all of our topics are
yeah,
fun, but this one, certainly, I think both of us are music geeks as well as movie geeks. So
yeah,
it's like the marriage of the two is just sometimes can be magical on the
it is.
screen.
Yeah, no, I was just joking a little bit there. It
Yeah.
was it also I liked picking this one. It I mean, we have like our master list of like, oh, these would be good ideas for future shows, and this just came up in conversations like, oh shit, we should do that topic now. So it's one of those like impulsive ones, but also it's a little bit of a different way to do a watch challenge than we've done so far. I mean, we're only in like 20 some episodes in here, but I've never went and watched a film because I heard there was a good needle drop scene. But now I'm going to because I put a few on my watch list that I was doing some reading and I was like, wait, that song's in that movie? Like, I'm gonna check that one out. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna do that one. But this was more like trying to compile like kind of, I guess, we'll get into like what is a needle drop, but like how they can be used. And also in doing some research, I was like, they can be used in so many different ways that I really hadn't given that much thought to, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is where YouTube really comes comes in handy for some of these episodes because so many other people have compiled these, or they just simply have the clip of where the song is
Yeah.
featured, and so many of them I'm surprised they're not like immediately flagged or you know silenced because of the lucrative nature of music licensing, which I
That's
mean that could be a subject for another day.
right, right, right.
But boy, but yeah, no, this is like the micro version, I guess, of Watch Challenge.
I guess to start off, maybe like what is a needle drop in case folks aren't familiar with that term. I just wrote it down as music that kicks in at a pivotal time in a film.
Yeah,
Usually pop songs. I don't mean that only as like pop songs could be rock, hip hop, death metal, like anything. But that was also just me coming up with something off the top of my head. Like that's what it means to me. Is that kind of how you're looking at it, Mike?
oh yeah, I mean it's like sometimes there is and a lot of times I'm sure it's conceptualized by whoever the director of the film is, but you also have these music supervisors who probably have to sit through movie multiple times and they
Mhm.
start to think of like, oh, what could work for this particular scene, and sometimes like more often than not, it's just such gold that some of these things or these people pick,
Yeah.
because it can really enhance something and or really make it more memorable. Sometimes it's like if you watch it with the sound clip or you watch it isolated,
Right.
just how the differences that a simple song can make is sometimes incredible.
And it's funny you mention it that way because in case folks hadn't listened to our previous episode or this is the first time listening for somebody, we mentioned at the end of our last episode, quick plug, which is all about film noir, about how needle doing a topic on needle drops really keeps us in a very kind of more modern film
Yeah.
context because it wasn't really a thing that was used. I mean, you can find examples of it. I get that, like Nothing But a Man or some earlier ones. But in 1967, you have exactly what you're describing. Mike Nichols is putting together The Graduate,
Yeah.
and he and his editor, producer, whoever else was around, they were just using Simon and Garfunkel songs because they were fans, and that was a contemporary, huge, folk rock ish duo. And then somebody at some point was like, "Why don't we just use this music?" Like they were using that as
Yeah.
like the rhythms to edit to, and because it spoke to the themes of the story they're working on, and then they ended up working with Simon and Garfunkel, and the rest is history. Very famous soundtrack, but also just kind of opened the floodgates of like, hey, you know what? You can just use popular music, whatever you love on the radio or in your record collection. Why not use that in your movies?
Yeah. No, I think you're right because like that. I mean, before that was probably just the music that was used in a movie was either the score or, there were so many Hollywood musicals that were made
Hmm.
in the 50s and 60s. But then, um, as we, as you got after The Graduate, like, say For example, like, you have a movie like American Graffiti, which
Oh my
is
gosh,
almost
yeah.
exclusively licensed music from the 1950s,
Mhm.
or the late, either like the very early 60s,
Right.
where probably before that it wouldn't have been thought of to use all of those songs. Like it would only have to be original works or something like
That's
that.
a good question, actually, because even and maybe we'll do this as a topic at some point, but I have a very soft spot for, like, the beach party films.
Oh yeah,
So, like, early, mid '60s, and they were using, like, at the time, his stage name, Little Stevie Wonder, is in one of those
sure,
movies singing one of his songs. So, like but it's not in the context that we're talking about with Needle Drops. Those were, like, performances built in within it. So, yeah, I
yeah.
wonder if Graduate or other stuff hadn't come along in the late '60s there, if American Graffiti would just be the one that, like, broke it all open.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'm sure at the time, I mean, I would have to look into this, but like, I'm sure at the time it wasn't as expensive back then to get like all of those songs, because maybe by then, because they were
Yeah.
about 20-ish years old, maybe they were just thought of as like, oh, that's old stuff.
Right.
But they're fine now. But I'm sure if like if you or I try to make American Graffiti now,
Oh, hello,
it would
15,000,000 just for
oh
music rights.
oh,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh
It
my
would
gosh,
just
yeah.
break the bank.
Well, yeah, I could see it going either way. I could see it going the way of, like, it would be cheap to get the rights because everyone's like, "You wanna use it for what? Yeah, who cares? Whatever." Or we're also in the era of, like, payola scams on the radio to
Yes,
get certain, songs out there, so maybe it would have been, price gouging a little bit.
right.
Um, I know one of the directors, and we're gonna kinda talk about some of the greatest that
Sure.
we aren't mentioning here in just a second, but I remember that story specifically coming about with, Richard Linklater putting together Dazed and Confused,
Oh,
which
yeah.
not pick because it's awesome, and I think it's very well known, and it's not one I wanted to highlight necessarily, but trying to get Sweet Emotion for that opening scene with Aerosmith,
Oh, yeah.
was like, "How much money are we paying for this?" Says the producer, and Richard Linklater was like, "No, man, I gotta open it with this," and fucking if that's not a memorable, first impression of a movie.
Oh my god, yeah. It's gotta be one of the
Yeah.
top 5, like, of, like, opening song choices,
Oh, for sure.
in the last, 25, 30 years, yeah.
Well, before we mention some of, like, the greats that we're technically going to mention, but not really mention, um, there was this thing that popped up, and being the filmmaker here of the duo, Mike, I wanted to ask you about being diegetic sound versus non-diegetic sound, but specifically for the songs that are being played.
Yeah.
So we've got diegetic, meaning the characters hear it in the scene, versus non-diegetic, they're not heard by the character, but we hear it. Well, we hear
Yeah.
both, so
Like, I would say, a great example of diegetic would be, the fact that, in American Psycho, you have Christian Bale's character, acknowledges Huey Lewis, before he makes one of his, kills, which I believe is Hip to Be Square.
Oh
Um
my god, that's a great I didn't even think about that one. That movie's full of those.
Yeah, it's like he'll I mean, because he talks about Huey Lewis, and then I watched a video where, Huey, I guess it was a tough sell at first because, they realize that it's associated with a movie about a serial killer,
Right.
but, once they read the script, and I think they saw some of the footage, they eventually signed off on it.
Yeah.
So that would be like the diegetic. A non-diegetic would be, there's a great sequence in Goodfellas that is done to, the ending portion of Layla, where it's like you have this nice tracking shot over this pink Cadillac of, we have like two dead,
Oh, yeah,
two
yeah.
of our dead, mobsters, and it goes into this nice little, montage, because it kind of segues towards the end of the film. But,
Yeah.
to me, that's one of the most memorable ones. It's just so beautiful. I mean, such beautiful music, but you're also seeing like horrific things sometimes
Yeah, it's an
happening.
all dead mobster montage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, that's a good point. Which is interesting that they could both be needle drops, but then also, as we were mentioning, like, getting rights to certain movies too,
oh yeah,
how it's you well, with the Huey Lewis too, like, that's a hard sell. We're like, "I wanna use your music." Obviously, we like your music and all that, but we're gonna use it while this guy's just murdering people in cold blood. Like, that's gotta be a hard sell to an
yeah,
artist, but also there's, like, this cost associated with certain rights too.
Yeah, it I've, like, there's been a couple times where with working with documentary type features where I've approached musicians about getting the rights, and so you normally have to go through their manager first, but you also have to go through not only the artist, but you also have to make sure that you get the clearance of the writer of the song, because a lot of times
Oh,
the
interesting.
you know, it could be like a very well-known song by Huey Lewis, but maybe John Cougar wrote it actually, you
Mhm.
know?
Right.
So you have to make sure it's cool with the writer, cool with the artist, and then eventually it usually leads to the via the manager, you are writing your letter, your like heartfelt letter saying why you want to use this song.
Sure.
There's actually a great special feature on the movie School of Rock, where they made this hardcore, like heartfelt pitch to Led Zeppelin, where they wanted to use "Immigrant Song" in one of the scenes, and for there was a time period where Led Zeppelin never licensed their songs. Like it was a very almost
Interesting.
very hard thing to do,
Yeah.
and so it was like they shot it at the end concert scene where
Mhm.
they had everybody kind of like cheering like Led Zepp or something like that, and they eventually signed off on it. So
Oh, okay,
it's
nice.
like it's sometimes you have to really give the intention of what it is,
Mhm.
and sometimes in lieu of showing what the footage is about, it's just sometimes having somebody like a Jack Black who is so impassioned when he speaks anyway,
Especially about
just
music
saying
too.
like why it's so important that
Yeah.
we need this song.
Interesting. And then also on top of that is like we mentioned with Dazed and Confused, like, can you afford it with your budget? Like, you may really want
Yeah.
that song. The way you actually were just describing that too, I was just thinking like, "Oh my gosh, think of all the great needle drop scenes we have missed out on
Oh
as
yeah.
an artist," and it's their prerogative, it's totally fine, was just like, "Yeah, no, you're not using my song there." Or maybe there's the great ones where like, oh, there's these great discoveries, like some of the greats again that we will maybe mention here, but we aren't using as our official picks or anything like that. Like Paul Thomas Anderson putting together Boogie Nights.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
there's a multi-million-dollar budget there, second feature film and all, but I don't know that there was like, oh, and here's 3 million just for music rights. So I feel like as a kid watching that movie, that seemed like a deeper dive into 70s music
Yeah.
and I got with some other larger Hollywood stuff, maybe, and I don't know this necessarily to be true, although I've listened to the 6 different commentary tracks or whatever he's got on all the different iterations of that movie on home video. I wonder if like the bit more of a deeper dive yielded a cooler needle drop because I was like, oh, I've never heard of like Spill That Wine before, as a
Yeah.
kid. And then it's like, oh my God, like I'm picturing that scene right now just because I said the name of that song.
Yeah, like, one example from that film, I love the song "Fooled Around and Fell in Love" by Elvin Bishop.
Mhm.
I think it's used by a lot of movies that takes place in the '70s. I
That's
think
true.
it just kinda evokes this tone, and there's a scene it's basically a scene which leads to William H. Macy's character eventually, murdering his wife
Yeah,
and
yeah,
himself, but, it also involves Philip Seymour Hoffman's character kind of pining for
yeah.
Dirk Diggler. I don't know. It's a marriage of like that whole kind of sequence, like those complicated sequences of those parties, which I'm sure on paper seem just like hangout scenes, but my guess is like those were complicated to film because you have so many storylines that you're trying to progress
Yes.
as movies go along, and sometimes the right song just kind of puts you in that party, I would
'Cause
say.
you're it's not just editing to the beat and rhythm of that particular song, but it's also multiple narratives, like you're saying, and having the emotional space to, like, actually perform, like, the heartache and the longing and the rejection that the characters are
Yes.
feeling right there too, and have it all kinda sync up with cross goddamn.
Yeah.
That's just such a perfect needle drop
Yeah.
movie.
No, there I mean, yeah, and it's like there's certain directors of that ilk, like Paul Thomas Anderson, like Tarantino,
For sure.
who are of a certain age, who I think, who grew up in the '70s, like knew a lot of the music from that era and probably the '60s as well,
Mhm.
and into the '80s. It's like, God, it's in Scorsese's like, he's like the generation before, so like he's got
Right.
like the knowledge of the '50s, '60s, and '70s. Like
Yep.
he still seems like I imagine his iPod is just like it stopped probably at like the 70s. I don't know. Or if like but who knows?
You know what? Actually, funny you should say that. One of the most jarring needle drops, and Scorsese in my book is just the goat. Like he's the greatest at doing the needle drops. He was around when it was invented as a
Yeah.
filmmaking technique. But his for I mean even Mean Streets has this great thing where again it's crap, I always fuck it up. Hang on. So it's a good, I think it's non-diegetic example where, and Mean Streets isn't his first feature film. You got Boss Bertha and Who's That Knocking on My Door, but it's the first one that kind of really went out to the public in a big way. And there's a scene where Harvey Keitel's sitting at the bar and Jumpin' Jack Flash kicks on.
Oh
Obviously,
yeah.
Scorsese has got a huge loving relationship with the Rolling Stones. And I can't remember if it's playing in the bar or not, but I feel like it's in a bar, so it could be playing, but it's really putting you in the headspace of that character. So it's very subjective,
Yeah.
non-diegetic example there. And then De Niro's character comes in and it's just like this fucking guy. It's just but one of the more jarring ones that he has is in The Departed, where he uses a Dropkick Murphys song called
Oh
"Shaking Up to
yes.
Boston," where I was
Yes.
like, wait, Scorsese's using a modern song? This is weird.
Yeah.
But also it's perfect because you have this New York filmmaker who went up to Boston, like, literally to make The Departed, a very Boston set, specific set, film, and then he kicks it off with, like, a Boston ska band, which I was like, "All right, man, right on,
Yeah.
right on."
Oh, no, it now it makes me just wanna watch The Departed
I
again.
know, right? Well, that was sort of the thing that hearing the songs or even just the title of a song, like that was kind of my criteria for how I picked a couple honorable mentions. And my main one was like the song itself, my visual in my brain is immediately the movie, was
Yeah.
sort of how I went with that. I also ran across this question of, because, and I have several different examples of it within my honorable mentions, but like a song that you either know the song and then it's used in the film, you're like, oh shit, I love that song. Like that gives you a different kind of endorphin rush of
Yeah.
recognition and appreciation of it versus also like a song kicks in and you don't know the song. We're like, oh fuck it, that was perfect.
Yeah.
Which I think honestly, because it's not really always my genre of music, that's more of the Wes Anderson school of song choices.
Sure.
Because I wasn't really like a big like, Velvet Underground fan or some of the stuff there at the time of seeing those movies where I was like, what the hell is that song? That's an amazing song.
Yeah, it's well earlier this year we had, or it was late last year, French Dispatch. It's like I think whenever a Wes Anderson trailer comes out, you're gonna hear some kind of like unique song that immediately like I'm googling like what is that? Like
Yep. Yep.
it sounds like avant-garde 60s
Yep.
or something. And I know there are some people who absolutely just despise like his movies because they're so kind of unique and out there.
Right. Right.
But no, I mean that always kind of gives me like a rush. I think when I see like a trailer for a Wes Anderson thing coming out, because yeah, he tends like he should be probably thrown in one of those in the categories with the Tarantinos and the other Anderson.
The other Anderson. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, all right. So, with all those like greats that I think with an easy Google search, or if you just asked anybody who's a casual film watcher, they would probably rattle off a lot of those same folks as well.
yeah.
Let's dive in a little bit deeper, Mike. What have you got for honorable mentions?
So one of my honorable mentions is from it's like one of those films that's a favorite of mine. Just and part of it is because I'm a huge baseball fan
Okay.
and also a Cleveland baseball fan. So from the film Major League from 1989, I have "Burn On" by Randy Newman, which opens that film. There's a red moon rising on the Cuyahoga River, rolling into Cleveland to the lake.
Oh, that's that song. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
"Burn
got it.
On" is written about Cleveland, and during the time when he wrote the song, it was very Cleveland was the butt of many jokes,
Mhm.
and the song is actually a satirical look of the Cuyahoga River catching fire. But in the
Oh,
context of Major League, it it's a really kind of beautiful song that looks at kind of the downturn that the Cleveland baseball team was having. Like straight years of losing,
Mhm.
and it kind of just matches it. So like there's like this nice montage to it that shows that they won the World Series in '48, but then since then they were pretty bad.
Yeah.
And I've heard him. He did like a concert here not that long ago, it's just like one of those songs where it's like it's so deceptive that it is kind of like poking fun of the city, but you listen to it and it's like I don't know, it's like music to my ears when I hear it because it says like Cleveland, city of light, city of magic, but then like there's all these like little pot jokes in there, or not pot, but what I mean, it's like jokes that are
Yeah.
kind of poking fun at the city. But it's perfect setup for that movie, in my opinion.
No, I agree, and it's not a singer or artist that I know too well, and then when you said the
Yeah,
name, I was like, "What song from Major League is that one?" Because it's not, Wild Thing, so what song are you talking about? But as soon as you mentioned the opening, I was like, "Oh, I'm immediately picturing it, and I can hear
yeah,
that song."
yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
So I just realized I wrote these out in chronological order, so, well, let's stick with that. So the first one I was thinking of was going back to, like, when the needle drop started. We mentioned The Graduate in '67. My
Sure.
first pick is from '69, one of my all-time favorite American films, Easy Rider, uh,
Ah, yes.
directed by the madman Dennis Hopper himself. And I use this in the new Hollywood class I teach as well, and when I show this film or even the trailer for it, this song, "Born to Be Wild" by Steppenwolf, I feel like is just so associated with that movie, and if you have seen that movie, as soon as I said "Born to Be Wild," the way it just kicks off, boom, you know?
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway.
It
Looking
it
for
hits running,
adventure.
like, there's motorcycles on the road, they're off and running, it's after the drug deal's gone down,
Yeah.
and they got their tank full of, gas tank full of money, and they're hitting the road, and it's, two dudes, like the modern Western electric horses
Yes.
hitting the road. This time, instead of heading to the west, they're heading to the east, which I think is a fun take on the Western. But I have the soundtrack for that film on vinyl, CD, like anytime I'll just hear that on the radio. It'll just like pop on the radio. I'm just like, oh, I gotta watch Easy Rider right now. It's just so ingrained. I don't. I mean, I watched Easy Rider so long ago. I don't know if I was aware of that song before seeing that movie or not.
Yeah,
So I, in VHS in high school, I couldn't say that memory is long gone by now. But when I think of just the way that drum, the guitar, like it all hits right at the beginning, just boom, we're off and running, and that's the way the movie goes. It just hits and it's off and running.
that's awesome.
And since it's '69, I have to think, kind of like we were speculating with American Graffiti. I feel like one of these movies would have come along. Obviously, Easy Rider was a couple years before American Graffiti, but this 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 needle drop pop music on the soundtrack just was gonna happen sooner or later anyway. I feel like it was just ready to go. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
The Graduate blew it open in '67. By the time we get to Dennis Hopper in the editing bay doing Easy Rider in '68 and '69, yeah, great. I mean, just it's like a greatest hits of the rock soundtrack of the era.
Absolutely.
So, what else you got, Mike?
My next one is from a movie from 2009, which to many people probably would be kind of obscure at this point. But it is a movie by Jody Hill, who's the creator of Eastbound and Down
Yeah.
and Vice Principals. It's called Observe and Report with Seth Rogen. And the song in question is the Yardbirds Over, Under, Sideways, Down. All right. Over, under. Yeah. Over, under, sideways, down.
Cars and girls are easy come by in this day and age. Laughing, joking, drinking, smoking till I spend my wage. When I was
A very cool song, but it's used in this montage. So basically, Seth Rogen plays this mall security cop who's kind of like at a crossroads. He's kind of a lonely person, and he has this cohort that is that is played by I know his last name is Pena,
Oh,
but
Michael Pena.
yes,
Yeah.
but they are like the perfect like duo here. But there's it's this montage basically where they're doing cocaine and a bunch of other drugs, and they are basically they're like they're running around the mall, protecting it from like kids. So like they're like breaking skateboards, and
Yep.
they're like riding the cheap mall rides and stuff. I don't know. It's just like such a weird movie, but just like such an upbeat scene set to this song. And because it's basically, I mean, it's a '60s song. It's probably there was a lot of psychedelics done to that
Oh,
probably,
yeah.
and they're doing quite a bit of drugs in the film, and it's I don't know. It always stuck out to me. I mean, that movie I probably haven't seen it for a while, but that particular scene was very memorable for me.
Yeah. I adore that movie. I have not seen that in a while, but I remember seeing it twice in the theater, and I was like, "What song are you talking about?" And then as soon as you were describing, it's like, "Oh, I remember that montage exactly. I need to watch that right
Yeah,
now."
yeah, such a very dark,
It's
dark movie for
very,
like a mainstream film,
very dark. Yeah.
but yeah, very unique and a memorable needle drop for sure.
Yeah. And it was one of those where I was like, "Oh my god, I need to see Michael Pena do way more comedy because
Yeah,
he is committed to that
he's
like
so good.
crazy hard." Speaking of comedies, I did wanted to have one comedy on my list, and I was like, "Man, maybe just needle drops and comedies aren't really a thing as much."
Yeah,
And I didn't explore that too deeply because I thought of something right away where I was like, "Holy shit!" Like it was almost my actual full pick
yeah.
for this one, and that is the song "I Got You, Babe" by Sonny and Cher from Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe. Okay, campers, rise and shine, and don't forget your booties, cause it's cold out there.
It's cold out there every day. What is this, Miami Beach? I
Not
don't think so.
hardly.
Because as anybody who's seen Groundhog Day, which I'm just going to assume is everybody listening to this right now, because one of like the iconic Bill Murray films,
Oh
well,
yeah.
Harold Ramis film, sorry, but Bill Murray's leading the show here. It starts off as just like, oh yeah, that's totally a morning crew song that would that a song that a morning crew would play to like get you up and moving, and you get the great dynamic of the radio crew that are like, it sure is cold out there, and like the whole thing to do the "I got you, babe." But then as the day repeats over and over again, it puts us totally subjective. So also this is a diegetic example. So like they hear it. Bill
Yeah.
Murray hears it in there. And then we go through the ups and downs of like hating that song and then just like resigning ourselves to like, well, we're just going to be here. And like on the 50th time we hear it, we're like, okay, we're just going to be hearing this every few minutes when he re-wakes up again. And at the point where we get full of rage, he's breaking the alarm clock, he's smashing it, chucking out the window, whatever. And then we're like totally resigned, or at least I am as a viewer. Every time I watch it, by the end, we're just like, you know what? I've come around. The song's fine. It's like you just sort of zen out and let it happen. And then when it doesn't play at the final end, you're sort of like, I kind of miss that song.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And there's like this weird relief, but like, oh, all right, interesting. Uh, so I wonder, as far as rights go, when you're getting a song like that, song is played like 1,000 times in that movie. Was
Oh yeah.
does that just cost more money then? Like the amount of
Um,
times you're using it?
there is sometimes a cost of like how long it's used in the song. So if it's the full song, it's going to be a little bit more if it's only a snippet.
Oh, good point.
There are times where when I Got You, Babe, it's only sometimes like 10 seconds,
Oh, if
15
that, yeah,
seconds.
it's real quick.
So yeah, they probably cut a deal in that regard. And, I'm sure if they read the script, I know at that point they were divorced and everything. And I'm sure that's where it gets a little murky.
Oh, true.
But but I'm sure if they read it, I mean, I can't speak for Cher or Sonny Bono, but I'm sure they read that. They were like, "Oh, that's a pretty cool script."
That's
But
hilarious. Yeah.
who knows?
He may have even been in Congress at that point. I forget when he died or whatever, but they had
Yeah,
a career going as well. But so yeah, that's my comedy pick. So also another like a diegetic example of like the character is hearing it in that one. So
for sure.
any other honorable mentions, Mike?
Yeah, so my last one, I'm a big fan of like the 80s montage or that I think like you could say like from between the 80s and then early 90s, there are a lot of like there's like kind of showstopper montage scenes in movies, like be it sports movies or like comedies. I mean there's so many I can name, but for this one, I'm gonna go with I'm a big Rocky Four fan.
Okay.
Of like I love the Rocky movies, but Rocky Four in particular, there's something about it. It's a little campy. It's like very 80s pro USA,
Yeah.
anti Russia
Yeah.
kind of thing. But there is a sequence in the film where there's so many montages in that movie. Like it's you could just call it a montage movie, really.
Yes.
Um, but there are like back-to-back montages. One is just is an instrumental, and then by Vinnie DiCarlo, I think, who scored that one. And then you have Hearts on Fire, which is by John Cafferty and the Beaver Band.
Silent darkness creeps into your soul. Envy rules the line of self-control.
And John Cafferty actually probably best known for having a great needle drop in the movie Eddie and the Cruisers, which is called On the Dark Side. But this one, Hearts on Fire, is it's like the ultimate boxing movie montage. You have the East versus West.
Mhm.
The Russian has like all the most state of the art stuff, or Rocky's like in a cabin chopping wood and like lifting boulders and all this stuff and running up mountains. Eventually he gets to the top and he yells Drago as the song comes to this like climax. It's I use it actually as the exit song for my wedding a couple years
Oh, nice.
ago. um, it's just I don't know. It's just it's very cheesy song, and it's filled with like not only guitars, but you have a lot of like synthesizers from that were popular in that time period. But such a great song, and it just makes me think of all the punching and everything.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those when you hear the song, or you think of the song, you're just like, I just got to go watch that.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. I don't know if I've ever gone that deep into the Rocky franchise, so that's a gap I've
Yeah,
got.
I mean,
I'm not
arguably, it's
referencing that particular needle drop because I have not experienced that needle drop.
arguably, it's some people could look at like you see the first one won Best Picture Oscar. By
Mhm.
the fourth, it had really gotten kind of showing with the times. I think it was very excessive 80s,
Sure.
a lot of flashy editing, very MTV style
Yeah.
editing, and the characters were not as like fully developed. It was just kind of like you hit the beats and you get
Yep.
to the next montage.
Yeah, we got a
So
formula here, folks. Let's do it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
But you and actually a couple other people I know that are like that really love the Rocky series and then the Creed spinoffs as well cite that as like personal favorite. Like it may not be the best, but oh my god, it's so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the shortest, so I guess it's easier to digest.
Well, I have one last honorable mention before we get to our actual picks here,
Sure.
and this one is my most modern one. This falls in the category of song I did know ahead of time that I adore. It was part of the soundtrack to my college years. Me and my roommates were huge fans of the John Spencer Blues Explosion.
Mm.
So, and I at the time of watching Baby Driver in 2017,
Oh, yeah.
I was a casual Edgar Wright fan.
Sure.
He was one of those where like I would listen anytime he was on a podcast or wrote an article, because he's just like one of those uber film geeks who I would like go to for like, I want to hear what he's talking about and I want to get a whole bunch of recommendations. But for some reason, I didn't have this compulsion to like, I got to see everything he does. I'm there now. But it wasn't there like earlier on. Like I'll get to it eventually, kind of thing to it. And I can still remember like what theater and what seat I was in watching Baby Driver on those Thursday night preview screenings. And
Yeah.
the opening sequence is set to the entire 5 minute and 17 seconds of Bell Bottoms by John Spencer Blues Explosion. And it's also, I think, just one of the top tier car chases that's ever been filmed.
Yes.
It's Baby at the wheel with the crew that's robbing the bank, and it hooked me because I love the song, but also the way that Edgar Wright and his cinematographer and his editors put it together. We don't see the bank robbery.
Right.
We just sit with the getaway driver in the car, and he's got his earbuds. Well, at the time too, it's corded earbuds in on his iPod, and he plays music to keep himself focused and not distracted while he's the getaway driver. So it's also this really kind of awesome. It's diegetic, but for one person in the scene, and for us watching it. And it goes to the ups and downs of that song. And like, if you know the song, there's like quieter parts, then it gets immediately crazy, and then it gets quieter, and it's all over the place. And that editing to that, an amazing car chase sequence as well. I was like, oh my God, you have got me. I'm 5-star movie already. Let's see what you got after this. And that was just the opening scene. And then the whole movie itself is kind of, I have a very liberal sense of what a musical is. But that one to me is like, it's a musical.
Oh yeah. After that great opening sequence, it's you have this like the opening credit sequence where everything is kind of like, he's like moving to a certain beat, and and the way how the credits show up and stuff. I don't
Even
know.
like some of the lyrics to the song he's listening to, I
Yes.
think it's Harlem Shuffle, the way it kicks off.
Yes.
We'll watch that one in a little while. But some of it, even like the lyrics are like graffiti in the background as he walks by. You're like, God, how do you? And it's all single take as well, for that opening credit sequence as well, at least. So like, God damn, the choreography there is like a musical.
Yeah, such a great movie, and I don't know if like, I don't have cable traditional sense, and it's like I'm sure like that would be one that gets played often, but I'm sure there's a slight tinge of because it has Kevin Spacey, so like it may not be shown as much. I don't know, but it's like, can they just CGI over his face or something?
He's also a supporting character, so it's not like a starring vehicle for
Right.
him. And he plays a sleazeball in the movie, so fuck it,
Right, exactly.
We're good. But all right, Mike, what is your what is your actual watch challenge pick for Needle Drops?
Absolutely. So I think one of my favorite films of all time, and this is now it's over 20 years old now, but is Cameron Crowe's Almost Famous, and I'm gonna go with Tiny Dancer. And it's an example of the diegetic where everybody is aware of the song in the film. It's like at a pivotal time in the film where we have Russell, the leader of the band, the guitarist, who is just had this kind of drug fueled night where he goes to a party and basically is doing a lot of thinking about the band, because he is kind of like put together in the spotlight, maybe rightfully so, but like he's kind of the one getting more of the spotlight, where the rest of the band kind of thinks they're an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of the scene where they all come back together, and it's like a big, almost like apology to everybody. It's like everybody's in a weird place, but then this particular song kind of gets them all back on the same map.
The power of music.
Jesus freeze out free. And then tickets are forgone. Turning back, she just laughs. The boulevard is not that bad. Piano man, he makes a stand in the auditorium.
I'm a big Elton John fan. Finally got to see him live a couple years ago. Now it's like a 4 or 5 year Goodbye Yellow Brick Road tour. But this was, when I saw that show, like this, it was one of the highlights to hear that
Oh,
live.
sure.
Tiny Dancer. But in this film, it's like it's the high point, I think, of that film. And so many great performances, and there's all these like little nuances that the characters are giving during that particular scene that you kind of like. There's something about that film where it's like you really fall for those characters, because each of them is very distinctly given
Mhm.
their own quirks and everything. And Cameron Crowe being a music person himself, growing up in that world and
Yeah.
being a rock journalist, I think, now there's like this, I know it's going to be talked about in our next episode, but like a lot of filmmakers are making films about them becoming filmmakers,
Filmmakers,
or,
yeah.
this is like, he almost kind of started the trend of like looking backwards and kind of making a film about his youth. And so, yeah, I think that's why Almost Famous Tiny Dancer is my pick.
That was on my short list because I was thinking about that one a lot too. I was actually looking at it as kind of both diegetic and non-diegetic because the
Sure.
song itself, like, and you know better than I do, but I feel like it starts off with like some light piano,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and you think it's just this melancholy end when like the tour manager, the guy with the awesome mustache and the hat, is
Yes.
like getting Billy Crudup away from the party, and Patrick Fugit's character too, the young rock journalist, they're getting away from the party. Like, I'm sorry, folks, the evening has come to an end. Blah, it's
Right.
dawn.
We'll see you in 74.
There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evening is over. We hope you all enjoyed yourselves, and we'll see you all again in 1974. Good evening!
Blue jean baby, LA lady.
Yeah, and so like you have like this like kind of melancholy little piano riff, and then you realize like, oh, it's Tiny Dancers, but we just think it's the score to that scene. And then once they're all on the bus, like you said, it's awkward at first, and then people just start singing Tiny Dancer, and it brings everybody together. So like it shifts from being what seemed like a non-diegetic sound to just kind of like put a cap on this crazy scene.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a diegetic thing where everybody hears it and everybody comes together, and we're like, all right, let's keep rocking on to the next
Yes.
sound. So perfect. Such a great use of music there.
Yeah.
Also like original music and popular music as well from that time period.
Oh, for sure. For sure. What did you end up picking?
So I picked one that I actually do need to do a spoiler alert for. So I went with the film Moonlight from 2016. Barry Jenkins. I think so far I'm hope early in his career. So far though, I would argue that it's his masterpiece. It's just one of like the best films of that decade, in my opinion, the way it came out. But if you haven't seen it, what I'm going to talk about is going to spoil like the last third of it. So if you're unfamiliar with Moonlight or you don't want the ending spoiled, stop listening, I guess, which is weird advice for a podcast to get. But it builds so well. If you're familiar with the film, it's told in 3 different parts where we get Chiron, and as a young kid, as a teen, and then as a young adult, a young male. And in the final third of it, he reconnects with with his friend Kevin, who's like the one sexual experience that he had that was, not want to say memorable, but like the defining moment of like realizing who he is sexually as a young man.
Yeah.
And then like they cannot have a relationship. They don't, because of the movie happens. But in the last third of it, which, as rough and as maybe depressing or traumatizing as the experiences that Chiron experiences in parts 1 and 2, there are these great moments of joy that are like signs of life where like, it isn't going to be all bad for you, kiddo. Can you just hang in there a little bit?
Yeah.
In the last third of it, I even rewatched it earlier today, and like I'm smiling the whole time. Partly because I know where it's going to go,
Yeah.
the spoiler thing. But like, there's just so much like hope and joy at the final end here. And so as I was rewatching it, it's when Chiron arrives at the diner where Kevin works, and or restaurant really, where Kevin works, and they're reconnecting for the first time since like that middle chunk where they have like their moment together on the beach.
Yeah.
And as I was watching it, I was waiting for there's this needle drop that I'll get to in just a second, but there's like three or four things that happened before that. I was like, okay, I didn't even realize how Barry Jenkins was building up the anticipation in the audience for what this needle drop is going to be. And Chiron is just very reserved. He can't talk. Kevin even calls him out. He's like, "You drove all this way. You can't say more than 2 words to me, man. You haven't changed a bit or whatever." So as he pulls up and Kevin doesn't know he's there yet, he's listening to Classic Man by Jadea or Jadena. And it's like this interesting kind of remix version of it. So like, he puts on a fresh shirt, he combs his hair. So he's like, very classic man. So the music is commenting on it and it's heard in the scene. And then as he enters the diner, it's One Step Ahead by Aretha Franklin as he enters the diner. So it's this like entrance song. And this diner restaurant has a jukebox. So everybody else is hearing the song as well. And then Kevin and he say hi to each other. And Kevin's like, "Oh, you know what? Hey, I'll get you the chef special, man. Man, go have a seat. I'll fix you up in a good plate." And so when he does that, though, it switches to an orchestral piece that Nicholas Britell, the composer, made for the movie. So then that's non-diegetic. But
Sure.
it's this great little like kind of dreamy montage of Kevin putting together the meal, and it's like kind of almost like the seduction scene, like seduction through food, like the care
Yeah.
and preparation of getting a meal together for someone you care about, sort of thing. And then Our Love by Edge of Darkness plays on the jukebox as they sit down, and then finally, what we were waiting for is Chiron goes, "Why'd you call me?" Because so Kevin had called him to be like reconnect or whatever, and Kevin says, "Well, I told you this guy came in and he played a song the other day, and he just stops talking. He gets up, goes to the jukebox, and he's going to play the song." So then we're like, as an audience, like, what song is it? So it builds this really great little bit of anticipation. And then Hello Stranger by Barbara Lewis kicks on, and it is diegetic. They both hear it. And it's this beautiful way to use the music because the characters already said, "This reminded me of you. That's what a song reminded me of you or of
Yeah.
us. That's why I called you." And they don't talk at all. Like the lyrics of the song say everything.
My baby, chubop, chubop.
Hello, stranger. It seems so good to see you back again. How long has it been?
Seems like a mighty long time. Chubop, chubop, my baby.
And that's usually when I start crying. I'm like, "Oh my God, they're together. They can finally tell each other how they feel, and it's gonna work out. Maybe it'll be okay." And the ups and downs of just like their meeting there is like maybe they are in a relationship, are they not? Nobody's really talking too much. But then once the music kicks in, you're like, that's the power of music. It brings them together. Almost Tiny Dancer way. Like it fills in the gaps and it smooths things over. And they can just they just hang out and they have the evening together, and then it ends just fucking beautifully, and you're crying because you're so happy that there's actually a bit of joy in both of their lives as we wrap
Yeah.
up the story there.
No, I think I had like a interesting experience watching that movie where I knew I could I think I remember going to like it was like a Cedar Lee. It was like not that many people there, but like it was one of those things where like I was enjoying it, but then that scene at the end, the way how it all came together, it was just like, well, that's a five.
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's like you're like, oh, this is pretty good. I can see why people are talking about it, and then when it hits you at the
Yeah.
end, boom.
That emotional punch there, man. We're just like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, you got me. Holy cow."
Yeah.
So
Good stuff.
yeah, absolutely. So our official watch challenge picks for needle drops, although to be honest, I have a feeling this is going to be a revisit topic because my list was really long. But our official picks on this particular episode for needle drops was Tiny Dancer in Almost Famous and Hello Stranger in Moonlight. I should say too, I did not know Hello Stranger going into that particular film. So that was one of those
Sure.
things where I was like, damn, did they write this for the movie? Like it's so perfect. But Anyway, Mike, what challenge do we have in front of us for next time?
So our next challenge is films about filmmaking. The Fablemans, the new Spielberg movie Empire of Light by Sam Mendes, and Babylon by Damien Chazelle all come out within the next couple weeks. So it seems like a good topic to look at, this increasing subgenre.
Well, even as you mentioned with Cameron Crowe, I don't know that he's done really about filmmaking. So like, it's not personal filmmaking. It's like the films that are directly dealing with like, here's how films are made,
Yeah.
kind of style as well. So
Yeah.
if you'd like to send your picks at all for films about filmmaking or any other topic or genre you'd like us to cover on a future show, watchchallengepodcast@gmail.com or the links in the show notes.
Until next time, rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you're using, and we'll see you with the next challenge.